My grandfather's funeral was supposed to be a day of quiet sadness, but it turned into the worst day of my life. I stood there, listening to the lawyer read the will in the grand drawing room of the mansion. I expected to hear my name, maybe splitting the estate with my Uncle Raymond. Instead, the lawyer read everything. The $30 million estate, the companies and the mansion itself had been left entirely to Uncle Raymond. The shock hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. My heart hammered hard against my ribs. Raymond stood tall and proud, looking like the lord of the manor he now claimed to be. When the reading finished, he walked straight up to me. His eyes were cold and full of a cruel joy I'd never seen before. "You heard the man, Nadia," he said, his voice low and hateful. "Grandfather felt you were simply unfit to manage his legacy. You have 4 hours to pack the few worthless things you brought. Get out." I started to argue, but 2 huge security guards appeared instantly. They took my arm, pulling me toward the front door. The shame was suffocating. As they dragged me onto the sweeping marble steps, I turned back. Raymond was standing inside, framed by the enormous oak doors, a smug, dark smirk twisting his mouth. The doors closed with a sound like a guillotine. My shock quickly changed into a burning fury. I knew deep down that this wasn't right. My grandfather and I were incredibly close. He would never have left me with nothing. I called the first lawyer I could think of, but it was useless. Raymond had already lined up every major law firm in the city. They all politely declined my calls, saying they had conflicts of interest. It was clear Raymond hadn't just taken the estate. He had bought the legal system too. I tried to access my personal bank accounts, the ones grandfather had set up for me years ago. They were all frozen. My credit cards were declined. Even my phone service was cut off. Raymond had acted fast, ensuring I was completely isolated and powerless. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a small backpack filled with basic items. The guard who had escorted me off the property looked embarrassed, but he just shrugged and drove away. I realized how completely alone I was. My grand house, my secure future, my whole life, all gone in a single afternoon. I had to face the awful truth. I was now homeless, walking down the long paved road that led away from the only family I had ever truly known. That night, I checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. The thin blanket scratched my skin, and the smell of stale smoke made my stomach turn. It was a terrible change from the feather pillows and silk sheets of my old life, but I didn't cry. Crying was a waste of energy. I started calling old family friends, people who had eaten dinner at our table for years. One by one, they all gave me the same cold answer. They were busy, they were traveling, or they said they were sorry, but they couldn't get involved in a private family matter. Raymond had clearly done his work well. The local society pages, which had once praised my grandfather, now had short, nasty articles about me. Raymond was telling everyone that I was unstable and that grandfather had been right to cut me off. The humiliation deepened with every hour. I was a ghost in my own city, a pariah nobody wanted to touch. This betrayal was worse than just losing the money. It was losing my history and my reputation. The silence from people I thought cared about me was louder than any of Raymond's insults. I realized my fight was not just for the money, but for my dignity. Just when I thought I was completely defeated, I got a call. It was Maya, a childhood neighbor who used to sneak over to the mansion and play video games with me in the attic. She was the only person who didn't ghost me. Maya showed up at the motel, gave me a fierce hug, and immediately dragged me back to her small, messy apartment. "You're sleeping on my couch," she announced, not giving me a chance to argue. Having a friendly face, someone who didn't judge me, felt like finding fresh water in the desert. As we sat drinking bad instant coffee, I told her everything. The will, Raymond's smirk, the frozen accounts. Maya was furious. She worked as an IT security analyst, and her brain was wired for finding holes in a system. "This is not right, Nadia," she said, tapping her chin thoughtfully. "Your grandfather loved you more than anyone. This whole thing feels fake. That will is fishy. We need to find proof that Raymond forged it." Her words, "we need to find proof," gave me the first glimmer of true hope I'd felt in days. It was terrifying, but Maya's loyalty made me feel strong enough to fight back. I knew I couldn't do this alone. Maya's belief in me gave me the strength to look back at the past few months. I started remembering the small, strange things Grandfather had said before he died. He had been acting secretive, spending hours locked in his study. Then I remembered an old voicemail. It was only a few seconds long, left the week before his sudden illness. I pulled out my old phone, which I hadn't used in months, and played the message. Grandfather's voice, usually booming and cheerful, sounded weak and strained. "Nadia," he whispered, "if anything happens, trust the box in my study. Only you know what's in there." The call ended abruptly. Box. I didn't know what kind of box he meant, but I knew the study. A small, dark room he always kept locked. I shared the voicemail with Maya. Her eyes widened. "That's it. That's his secret plan," she whispered excitedly. But there was a huge problem. Raymond had turned the mansion into a fortress. He had hired a new, massive security detail, and they patrolled the grounds day and night. The study was upstairs, right next to the master suite. Getting inside would be nearly impossible, but I knew I had to try. The box, whatever it was my only lead. We decided to break in under the cover of a huge thunderstorm, hoping the noise and the darkness would cover our movements. Maya, using her tech skills, managed to hack into the mansion's older secondary security camera feed, the one they used for the gardens, and found a small blind spot near the kitchen entrance. It was risky, maybe even crazy, but the thought of that box made my hands tremble with urgency. We slipped into the house like shadows. The air inside was heavy and still. Raymond's renovations had already started. The familiar smell of old wood and leather was replaced by fresh paint. We crept up the wide, carpeted staircase. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a gunshot. We reached the study door. Maya quickly worked on the lock, her fingers flying over the tools. Clicked open. Inside, the room was exactly as Grandfather had left it. We searched desperately for a box, checking every shelf, drawer, and hidden compartment. Finally, behind a heavy globe, I found a concealed wall safe. My heart leaped. Maya cracked the safe open in less than 3 minutes. It was empty. My hope crashed down. Just as I was about to give up, I heard a terrible loud clatter outside the door. A security guard was approaching. "We have to go," I hissed, pulling Maya toward the back window. The mansion's sheer size became our saving grace. We squeezed out onto a narrow ledge and shimmied along it until we reached a thick ivy vine that stretched all the way to the ground. The climb down was terrifying. The vine scratched my skin and the rain made it slippery. But we made it. We ran through the darkness and the pouring rain until we reached Maya's car miles away. Once we were safe, exhaustion and disappointment hit me. "The safe was empty, Maya," I whispered, defeated. "He must have found it first." Maya shook her head, still breathing hard. The voicemail said, "Trust the box." He might have already moved it. But wait, I just remembered something important. The lawyer. The one who wrote the will. I looked at her, confused. "Mr. Hanley. He's the one who signed the fake will." "Exactly," Maya said. "He was Grandfather's only lawyer for 40 years. He handled everything. And then, a month before the funeral, he suddenly disappeared. Nobody could find him to sign the final documents. I bet Raymond didn't write the will. He just found someone else to sign it after Hanley went missing. We need to find Mr. Hanley." Finding Mr. Hanley wasn't easy. The official record said he was simply missing. No sign of foul play, no note, just gone. It was a dead end. We spent days driving around his neighborhood, talking to anyone who might have seen him leave. Most neighbors just told us to go away, worried about getting involved. But finally, an old woman who lived across the street agreed to talk to us. She was terrified but needed to share what she knew. She told us that for weeks before he vanished, Mr. Hanley had been terrified. He kept the blinds drawn and wouldn't answer his phone. He kept saying, "They're watching me, they'll make me change it," the neighbor whispered, clutching her sweater tightly. He wouldn't say who they were, but he was worried about a document. Document that had to be the will. This wasn't just a simple forgery. It was a criminal operation involving kidnapping or maybe worse. The revelation changed everything. Raymond hadn't just outsmarted me. He had terrorized his own father's lawyer. The thought gave me a cold clarity. This was a battle between good and evil, and I had to win it for my grandfather and for Mr. Hanley. My savings were long gone. The cheap motel was too expensive. I had to face the reality of my new life. I started taking on the worst, lowest-paying jobs I could find. First, it was washing dishes in a greasy, hot restaurant kitchen. Then I moved to a late-night warehouse, loading heavy boxes onto trucks until my back ached. The work was dirty, tiring, and humbling. I, Nadia, who used to wear designer clothes and plan charity balls, was now scrubbing floors just to eat. Meanwhile, Raymond was living my life. I saw pictures of him constantly in the local press. He was publicly flaunting his luxury. New yachts, expensive parties, and interviews where he talked about continuing father's legacy. He always looked directly at the camera with that smug look. He even told one reporter that I was too unstable and lazy to understand business. His public insults fueled the fire inside me. Every aching muscle, every blister on my hands, became a reminder of the revenge I had to get. The warehouse was my boot camp. I was learning a new kind of strength, one that Raymond couldn't buy or inherit, the strength of a fighter who had truly lost everything. I knew I couldn't beat Raymond just by working minimum wage jobs. I needed specialized help, and Maya found it for me. She connected me with a man named Victor, an underground investigator who worked with old crime cases. Victor looked rough, but his eyes were sharp. I met him in a dark, empty bar in the middle of the afternoon. I told him the whole story. The will, the missing lawyer, the empty safe, and Raymond's sudden wealth. Victor listened carefully, sipping his drink. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "The timeline works," he said, his voice gravelly. "It's classic corporate takeover. The original will was likely destroyed, and Mr. Hanley was either paid off a lot of money or, more likely, silenced. The idea that Raymond might have been involved in something so dark made me sick, but also more determined. Victor agreed to help, but he warned me it would be dangerous. He said he would start by tracing Mr. Hanley's old records, looking for anything digital that might have been overlooked. "Raymond is playing a big game," Victor said. "If he forged a will, he's a thief. If he hurt a man to do it, he's a criminal. We need to find the physical proof that ties him to the crime." Victor worked quickly and quietly, staying completely out of sight. Few weeks later, he called me late at night. His voice was tense with excitement. "I found something," he whispered. "It's a long shot, but I found the lease for an old storage unit that Mr. Hanley rented just before he vanished. He paid for it a year in advance with cash. This had to be the place where Mr. Hanley had hidden the proof he was scared about." Maya and I met Victor at the unit the next morning. It was tucked away in a dusty, forgotten corner of a run-down building. Victor cut the lock. Inside, the unit was nearly empty, just a few old boxes of legal papers and a worn leather briefcase. I almost cried when I saw the briefcase. It was the one grandfather always carried. Inside the briefcase, tucked beneath a stack of old documents, was a small USB drive. It was clearly labeled with grandfather's initials. This was it. This had to be the key. But when we tried to open it on Maya's laptop, a screen popped up. "Password protected." The feeling of excitement instantly turned into crushing frustration. We had the evidence, but it was locked away, possibly forever. Maya spent hours trying every password she could think of. Raymond's birthday, the date of the funeral, the company name. Nothing worked. We were close but still defeated. I sat on the floor, holding the small drive, trying to remember everything about my grandfather. What secret word would he use? Then a childhood memory flashed into my mind. When I was 7, grandfather bought me a beautiful little wooden rocking horse. He made me promise to keep it safe and never tell anyone its name. He called it Whisperwind. It was a silly name, but grandfather always said, "The most important secrets are hidden in the most loving memories." I typed Whisperwind into the password box. The screen blinked, and the USB opened. My breath hitched. Inside were several files, but the most important were voice memos labeled Confidential R. Click the first one. It was grandfather's voice, tired and worried. He spoke about his suspicions of Raymond, about company accounts that didn't add up, and how Raymond was manipulating staff to seize control. The betrayal was far deeper than I thought. Then the last memo started. Grandfather's voice was clear, even though it was weak. "I need to contact my partner, Mr. Kaito, right away. He's the only one who knows the truth about Raymond's secret activities." The voice memo had given me a name and a clear path forward. I immediately contacted Victor, who used his resources to find Mr. Kaito. He was a very powerful, highly respected businessman who lived in a different country. It took several tense days, but Victor finally arranged a secret meeting. Mr. Kaito was a stern, quiet man with kind eyes. I played him the voice memos from the USB drive. As he listened, his face grew pale. "Your grandfather was right to be suspicious," he said sadly. "He contacted me just before he fell ill. He knew Raymond was trying to push him out." Mr. Kaito confirmed that my grandfather had never intended for Raymond to have the company. A second will existed, one that left everything to me and put Mr. Kaito in charge of managing the estate until I was ready. Raymond, of course, had destroyed this document and likely coerced Mr. Hanley to get his own fake will in place. The shame of Raymond's actions was overwhelming, but the good news was that Mr. Kaito had copies of all the company's financial records from that time. He told me that he would stand by me and help me fight Raymond. Mr. Kaito had more chilling news for me. "Raymond didn't just want your grandfather's money, Nadia," he explained, spreading financial reports on the table. "He wanted the company for something much worse." Mr. Kaito pointed to a series of huge, suspicious transactions. He explained that Raymond wasn't just managing the company poorly. He was using grandfather's entire business structure to launder money for criminal groups. The $30 million inheritance Raymond claimed was only the surface, Mr. Kaito said gravely. "The true value of the company is much higher, and it's tied up in illegal activities. Raymond has committed serious felonies. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It was a matter for criminal investigators. I knew I couldn't just get my inheritance back. I had to stop Raymond before he ruined my grandfather's entire legacy and went to jail." Mr. Kaito told me the biggest danger was that Raymond thought I was just a naive girl who had been easily defeated. He didn't know I had the voice memos and the evidence of his criminal actions. That underestimation, Mr. Kaito said, was what we would use against him. The danger became very real shortly after my meeting with Mr. Kaito. Maya and I were driving back to her apartment late one evening. The streets were dark and empty. I was talking excitedly about the plan, about how we would finally expose Raymond, when a massive, dark SUV suddenly roared up behind us. It started tailgating us, flashing its high beams aggressively. Maya tried to speed up, but the SUV kept pace. Then, terrifyingly, it swerved, intentionally trying to run us off the road. Maya shouted, wrestling with the steering wheel. She narrowly missed a telephone pole. The SUV quickly sped away, disappearing into the night, but the message was crystal clear. Raymond or his associates knew I was digging. My heart was pounding and I could barely breathe. We pulled over, shaking with shock and fear. We were safe, but the close call proved that Raymond was capable of anything. He had moved past stealing and into outright physical violence. I looked at Maya, her face pale in the faint streetlights. We had to change our plan. Staying in the city meant being a target. The car attack was the turning point. Mr. Kaito insisted I leave the country immediately. He knew Raymond wouldn't stop until I was completely silenced. "You need to become someone he doesn't know, someone he can't touch," Mr. Kaito urged. He used his immense network to help me move overseas to a completely new city. I was given a new name, a new identity, and a small, secure apartment. It was a terrifying change, but I knew it was necessary. I didn't waste a minute. Mr. Kaito hired the best tutors and mentors money could buy. I started an intense 2-year training program. I studied global finance, international business law, and investment strategies. I learned 3 new languages. I practiced leadership skills and negotiation tactics. I shed the naive, trusting girl who had been dragged out of the mansion. In her place, a cold, focused businesswoman began to emerge. Every long night, every textbook I read, was a brick in the fortress I was building around myself. I was no longer just the victim fighting for an old inheritance. I was becoming a predator, sharpening my claws for the inevitable confrontation. The training was grueling, but it paid off immediately. With Mr. Kaito's connections and my newfound skills, I started making small investments. I bought undervalued technology companies and sold them for massive profits. I learned to spot market trends and play the long game. My small investments grew rapidly, multiplying faster than I ever thought possible. I was a phoenix rising from the ashes of my old life. I worked 18 hours a day, sleeping only when I was completely exhausted. I loved the feeling of earning my own power, brick by brick. My bank account, which had been empty and frozen, began to swell. I became known in international business circles only by my new name, a brilliant young investor with a ruthless edge. After 2 years of relentless work, I finally looked at my financial statement. The number staring back at me was staggering. I had become exponentially wealthier than the $30 million estate Raymond had stolen. My revenge would be executed from a position of overwhelming, undeniable financial power. It was time. 2 years after I had been forced out, I returned to my country. I didn't announce my arrival. I moved silently like a ghost. Mr. Kaito's network kept me informed about Raymond. The news was exactly what I had hoped for. Raymond was a terrible, corrupt businessman. Without my grandfather's honest, guiding hand, and because of his illegal activities, his businesses were crumbling. The fraud and money laundering had started to catch up to him. He was losing major contracts, key staff were quitting, and his creditors were getting nervous. He was having to sell off parts of the company just to cover his mounting debts. Raymond, however, was far too arrogant to see the truth. He blamed the failures on bad luck and economic downturns. He believed the universe was simply conspiring against him. He had no idea that I, the girl he kicked out, was the single force behind his downward spiral. My quiet return was the first step in the final, deadly game. I watched his properties go up for sale, preparing my next move. The financial pressure on Raymond became unbearable. He was forced to start selling off his assets to pay his desperate creditors. These were the very properties that were supposed to be mine. I saw it as my opportunity to reclaim them piece by piece. I worked through a complex web of proxies, shell companies and anonymous buyers that Mr. Kaito had set up. I bought his vacation properties, his high-rise apartments, and even his antique car collection. Raymond had no idea that the mysterious buyer who was always making lowball offers and closing instantly was me. Every time a new sold sign went up on one of his properties, I felt a deep satisfaction. I wasn't just taking back the value. I was taking back the security he had stolen from me. The final prize, the most important piece of all, was the mansion itself. I waited patiently, knowing that eventually, he would have no choice but to sell the symbol of my grandfather's legacy. The day the original family mansion was listed for sale, I felt a sharp pang of both sadness and triumph. It was sad to see grandfather's beautiful home reduced to a distress sale, but it meant Raymond was completely cornered. I activated my final, most elaborate proxy. The bidding war was tense, but my resources were limitless. I put in a massive, anonymous cash offer that closed the deal within 48 hours. The mansion was mine. The very house Raymond had stood in, smugly watching me get dragged out, was now legally my property. I didn't move in yet. I waited. The paperwork was filed, the keys were transferred, and the property was secured. Raymond, who had moved into a small, rented apartment after selling his other luxury homes, was completely unaware that his former residence now belonged to his supposed victim. The stage was finally set for the grand finale, the moment he would learn that his victory 2 years ago had been the precise cause of his own total defeat. It was time for the final, brutal confrontation. I sent Raymond a formal, expensive-looking invitation. It was printed on heavy, embossed paper and delivered by a private courier. The invitation claimed that a mysterious, extremely wealthy international investor was interested in helping him save his last remaining company. Raymond, who was desperate and clutching at any straw of hope, immediately accepted. He had to be at the mansion, his old mansion, at precisely 3 p.m. on Friday. I knew he wouldn't turn down a chance at a massive bailout, especially one that involved a secretive figure. The invitation was the hook, the final lie that would lead him straight into my trap. I didn't mention my name or my new company. I wanted the reveal to be perfect, shocking, and absolute. I made sure every detail was meticulously planned, from the timing of the arrival to the people waiting inside the house. Friday arrived. The weather was bright and clear, a perfect backdrop for the drama I was about to create. Raymond arrived exactly on time, looking anxious and stressed, but still trying to put on a brave face. He drove a modest, borrowed car. He walked up the familiar steps, expecting to meet a friendly foreign billionaire. I, on the other hand, arrived in style. A fleet of 7 massive black luxury cars, complete with tinted windows and professional drivers, swept up the driveway. It was a proper motorcade. The cars stopped in a perfectly coordinated line, right in front of the grand entrance. The first driver stepped out and held the door open for me. I stepped out slowly, dressed in a sharp, expensive suit, my hair and makeup flawless. Raymond was standing there watching the spectacle. His jaw dropped. His eyes were wide with total speechlessness. He didn't recognize me at first, but the sheer display of power was enough to terrify him. I walked past the security team I now employed and into the mansion's drawing room, the same room where the will was read 2 years ago. Raymond followed me inside, his mind clearly racing as he finally recognized my eyes. He looked pale and sick. I let him stand there for a full minute, letting the silence hang heavy. "Welcome, Raymond," I said, my voice smooth and calm, echoing in the huge room. "I bought the house. I own it." His knees buckled slightly. I didn't stop. I walked over to the antique desk and placed 3 folders on top of it. "These folders contain 3 things," I explained, my voice steady. 1. The signed deeds to every property you recently sold. I own them all. 2. A copy of my grandfather's original valid will, along with the USB evidence that proves you destroyed it. 3. The complete financial audit, proving your massive money laundering scheme. I nodded toward the curtains. On cue, 2 plainclothes criminal investigators stepped out of the shadows. Raymond didn't say a word. He looked at the folders, at the investigators, and at me. He completely collapsed onto the floor. The confrontation was over in seconds. The investigators calmly read Raymond his rights and led him away in handcuffs. The spectacle of his arrest, right there in the family mansion, was the ultimate justice. The evidence was overwhelming, thanks to Mr. Kaito's and Victor's hard work. Raymond couldn't deny the voice memos or the financial trail. Within days, the local media erupted with the story of the disowned heir, who came back with a vengeance. The court quickly nullified the forged will. My grandfather's rightful will, leaving the entire estate to me, was restored. The $30 million inheritance, plus the companies and the mansion, were legally mine again. I didn't feel triumphant or happy. I felt a quiet sense of closure. Raymond had lost everything not because I was vindictive, but because his own greed and arrogance were so massive that they guaranteed his failure. He was sent to prison, where he would face the true consequences of his crimes. With the legal battles behind me, I set about restoring my grandfather's legacy. I immediately began cleaning up the companies, removing the corrupt elements Raymond had installed. I made sure the business returned to its honest, ethical roots. I took the time to truly thank Maya, who had risked everything for me 2 years ago, and I made her a partner in my own successful investment firm. I used the inheritance to start scholarships for students who had faced sudden, unexpected hardship, and I donated large sums to charities grandfather always cared about. Finally, I was able to walk through the mansion alone. I walked up the grand staircase and stood in the study, the same room where my life had shattered. I was no longer the broken girl who had been dragged out of the front door. I was empowered, a leader, and the rightful heir. Later that week, a final, sealed letter arrived for Maya. It was from grandfather. He wrote that he had known the risk, and he had hidden the box because he wanted to test my character. He always intended for me to prove who I would become before receiving the true power. He knew I could build my own empire, and he wanted me to discover that strength first. It was the most loving, final gift he could have given me.